talk about the national interest, I think I shall puke. This deal was done between two parties, the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, for one reason alone. Both of them were desperate for power, and both of them were willing to give up things that were precious to each of them because they were so desperate for power.
If you think, Melanie, that 6 months or 9 months of uncertain minority government would have been good for Britain, then I'm surprised at you.
I now want to hear from members of the audience. The woman in green up there on the right, please, then I'll come to you, sir. Yes.
Yes, surely the Liberal Democrats are in an incredible position now of being allowed to actually have some influence over policy and over government for the coming years.
And you approve?
Surely that's I think that's an incredibly positive position to be in.
Yes, the choice was between betrayal or irrelevance. If you hadn't done anything, Liberal Democrats are going to be irrelevant for a long, long time.
The man up there in the checked shirt.
Yellow. Oh, yeah, OK.
The man behind you, he's got a more checked shirt than you've got.
So there's plenty of checked shirts in the crowd tonight. I have to say, what Simon Hughes is saying is actually to be believed with regards to negotiations with Labour. Labour, the working class people's party, would not back a policy to lift people out of poverty with regards to £10,000 and where you start paying tax.
So you are critical of Labour for not doing a deal with the Liberal Democrats?
Well, Labour should have actually been a bit more responsive to demands in terms of negotiations with the Lib Dems.
And the woman in the centre here, in the fourth row, in black. Yes.
Yeah, it's quite obvious that both the parties just dropped all the policies that they made promises during the election campaign.
That's not true.
What about Trident and tuition fees? All these things have now been thrown out the window as soon as you got close to power.
Now, can I just deal with those two very quickly, because they're both very important policies. In relation to Trident, the commitment is to make sure for the next Parliament that we remain a country with Trident. That was always going to be the case because it has a life much longer than the next Parliament, but that the cost of Trident is now going to be looked at as part of the financial review.
But you wouldn't deny that you've given up a lot of things that were in your manifesto.
No, we've given up
I mentioned immigration.
We've given up some things, of course we have. Because
you've given up opposition to nuclear power, apparently now a Liberal...
No, we haven't
biggest issue of all.
No, we haven't.
And you've given up a commitment... Yes, exactly.
David, we haven't given up opposition to nuclear power. We specifically have retained that in the document.
But you've agreed that the plans for nuclear power to be introduced should now go ahead.
We've agreed...
That's what your agreement says.
No, I've got it here. I know exactly what it says.
Christian's made a statement today saying that as long as it's not public money, it can go ahead.
And who gave the better guarantee that there would be no public subsidy for nuclear power? It was the Tories, not the Labour
So
Party.
You're dead happy, really, with everything
that's happening? I'm not dead happy, but it's a compromise because in the interests of trying to get a stable government, you have to sometimes make compromises.
The man in the red T-shirt up there at the back, on the left.
I didn't expect to come here and agree with Melanie Phillips, but I think she's absolutely right. There's been an awful lot of talk about acting in the national interest and new politics, and in fact I think what we've seen is an example of politicians acting in old politics and purely out of self-interest.
OK, and the person up there on the right, on the gangway, yes.
I feel the Lib Dems have just realised that Nick Clegg only wanted power, and that's why he's Deputy Prime Minister, and that's the reason that he went into coalition with the Tories.
You think that was his motive? OK, and I'll take... you, sir, there in the middle. Yes, you.
I think the Labour Party have actually snatched victory from the jaws of defeat by avoiding this coalition. Purposefully.
You've got a point on that. We'll come to later. Michael Hesselstein, yes.
Well, I think that there are many people in my party who would think that the narrow self-interest of the Conservative Party was to try to go it alone and to have a general election in October, having had a budget which was more acceptable than the Labour Party might have thought. That would have been a perfectly viable strategy, but it would not have been a long-term strategy, and it would have been dangerous to the economy. So you can all this stuff about concessions. Let's not mince our language. Of course there have been concessions, but the issue that you, the masters of democracy, have to face is this: do you want a firm government, or do you want the uncertainties that you created in the way you voted? And the only way... could you just give a minute? The only way you can conceivably get a firm government is if both Conservative and Liberal make concessions. That is what they've done, and that is the position you put them into, from which there was no escape.
Well, I'm very much enjoying this defence, and I'm glad you're both sitting together. I'm wondering how long the BBC are going to invite two parties on. I don't know why they're both here. But just very quickly, let me finish. The very short answer to Michael Heseltine is, that's an admirable view, but it's a great U-turn. 2 days before the election, you wrote in the Evening Standard, even without a majority, Cameron will govern without a deal with the Lib Dems, and rightly so. But as soon as the deal is done, it's a fantastic deal.
No.
It's in the interest of the nation.
I'm delighted that you quoted what I said, because that was the narrow self-interest of the Conservative Party. That's what I thought might well happen. Actually, David Cameron put a national judgment in place and said, no, I will not just do what's the narrow interest of the Conservative Party, I will try to do a deal and make the compromises, because that is what the electorate has asked us to do.
All right. We'll go on to another question.
The reason why we're all three here is because nobody got a majority, and indeed no party got even 40% of the votes of those who voted.
Before we go on to another question, if you're into Twittering, just a reminder that we're at BBC Question Time. And remember, you can also text us during the programme, 83981, CFAX page 155 to see what's being said. Watching digitally, push the red button. Email us at our website. I know there's a lot of interest in all these topics, and that's the way to get your voice heard. Let's go on to a question on the other foot, so to speak, from Lucy Jane Walker.
Has David Cameron sacrificed too much in forming the new government?
As David